The fuck? Oh my god, I would have won if Akuma wasn't just such bullshit. Maybe if Kage was busted like Akuma, I would have actually won. You know what? Hold on. Who's a good player? Idom. Yeah, okay. It's good to have posted a tier list recently. Ah, right there. Right, where's Kage? Okay, near the bottom. And Akuma? Where's Akuma? At the top. No surprise there, that's why I lost. If you're in any part of the fighting game community, then it's very likely you know what a tier list is. I mean, if you use social media, then you've probably run into a tier list before about pretty much anything. Fast food tier list, chocolate bar tier list, the list goes on. Despite the mainstream use of tier lists now, you may or may not be surprised to hear that the fighting game community is the birthplace of tier lists. So of course, they're everywhere in this community. No matter the game, you'll find many different tier lists for it. They could look similar, or they could look pretty different. This is bound to happen because tier lists are subjective. But tier lists suck ass, and before I explain why, let's make sure we're clear on what type of tier list I'm talking about. Character strength tier list. The most popular form of tier list in the FGC, a character strength tier list. These lists rank the relative strength of every character in the game at top level. The most popular way of doing this isn't to rank everyone individually, but rather to have a few different ranks and group characters into each of them. For example, S to D tier. That's just 5 ranks, but you can fit a roster of 80 in there by putting a bunch of characters into one group to say they're all of a pretty similar strength. Sometimes characters are ordered within these groups, sometimes they aren't. It's up to the person who created that tier list to tell you. Things to keep in mind about tier lists is that they reflect the current meta, they can change at any time with any new discoveries, they're all super subjective, and they are usually indicators of strength at the top level. With that out of the way, back to the original point of this video. How tier lists affect you. They just aren't good for a healthy mindset. The obvious issue you may have noticed with the example I gave at the start of the video is that the losing player blamed their loss on character strength rather than individual skill. Now before you go, thank god that's not me, to a very exaggerated example, I think tier lists have a small effect similar to this on everyone, whether they like it or not. If you're the type of player to blame your losses on your own skill as a player, that's a healthy mindset to have. However, even for you, and for everyone else, once you've seen a tier list, you can't unsee it. It's harder for your mind to blame the strength of a character for your loss, which is something I think we naturally like to do. Even if you're aware that most results ultimately come down to your own skill, once you've seen a tier list, it's very hard to avoid at least partially thinking that the character balance plays a part in the outcome. Realistically, sure, character balance plays some part in the outcome, but how much of a part does it play? Here's a messy quick graph on how relevant I think tier lists are at different skill levels. As you can see, it basically is completely irrelevant up until the highest level. Tier lists represent character balance at the highest level. That means most players are playing at a level that the tier list does not represent, yet when these players think about their characters, the image that comes to mind is of a tier list that is representative of top level play. Most of the time, it's just not the biggest factor of why you won or why you lost, it's often just how you play it. Hearing that your character is a certain tier can divert your attention away from that, even though you sometimes might not realize it. However, not knowing the tier list at all gives you less excuses to make, thus making it easier to look at your own flaws in your play and improve on that instead. And there's another reason that tier lists aren't as representative of your matches as they look. It's natural to assume that if you're playing a character that ranks lower on a tier list while fighting a character that ranks higher on a tier list, your character has a harder time winning the match, right? Wrong. What tier lists cannot represent is individual matchups. It's not like they should have to though, tier lists just represent the current meta. The overall strongest to the overall weakest. That's all. It doesn't actually show you the matchup you're playing anywhere. So, when people refer to the tier list as an indicator for how hard they're working in their current match, or just try and make an excuse out of it at all, they aren't actually saying anything. Picture this. It's Street Fighter V and someone has decided to play Nash. They know he's a bottom 5 character, everybody knows it, and there's not really a debate. They're up against a Poison player. Poison is generally considered to be one of the stronger characters in the cast. So, With this dynamic of weak character versus strong character now established, the Nash player, consciously or subconsciously, now believes they are fighting an uphill battle. At some point, maybe after losing a few times, they may say something like, "Nash sucks." And yeah, that's true, Nash sucks. But what's important here is that they've said this because they already believe they're fighting an uphill battle, because they know Nash is low tier and Poison is high tier. Once you're in this mindset, it becomes easier to excuse your losses on the characters rather than how you've played. Now, here's the thing. A tier list got the Nash player all the way into that mindset, but they're not fighting this supposed uphill battle at all. I said tier lists don't actually say anything, but you know what does? Matchup chart. What the hell is a matchup chart? Well, I'll explain that later, but anyway. The same player who posted that tier list, IDOM, posted a matchup chart for Poison in the same season. Lo and behold, Nash is considered by the same player who made that tier list I showed earlier to be an even matchup for Poison. There was no inherent uphill battle at all, they're both just as likely to win that matchup. The point of this whole example is, whether knowingly or unknowingly, we sometimes jump to looking at a tier list as an indicator of how hard we're working to win a match. But it's important to remember that a tier list doesn't actually say anything about that specific matchup. But let's keep it realistic here too. That all sounds fine and dandy on paper, but it's also easy to find correlations between characters being low tier and likely having to work harder in a specific match. It's natural. After all, although people have their own methods for creating a tier list, a popular method for making a tier list is by ranking how good a character's matchup spread looks. How this works is that, the more winning matchups you have, the higher on the tier list you place. The more losing matchups you have, the lower you are. It makes good sense because tier lists simply can't represent every single matchup in the game. It needs to demonstrate a character's strength overall. And of course, the matchup spread isn't the only thing people take into account when they make a tier list like this, but it's an important one. So, when a character places low on a tier list like this, it's more likely that whichever matchup you're currently playing, there's a higher chance that you are losing that matchup. But the thing is, in balanced fighting games, which a lot of modern ones are, you might see that the top tiers don't necessarily dominate matchups, rather, they just have a lot of winning to even ones and not many losing ones. This means that some of these top tiers you're up against are just up there because they either win or go even with almost everyone, so the matchup you're playing against them could likely be even rather than an inherent uphill battle. In some rare cases, it might even be a winning matchup for the low tier. You want to know what can really tell you when your character has to work hard in a match? Matchup charts. Now I can explain what a matchup chart is. Matchup charts look like this. Visually, they often look like tier lists, but they're conveying totally different information. Matchup charts focus on one character to show how their matchups look across the cast, often ordering them from winning/advantage matchups, to the even ones, to the losing/disadvantage ones. Matchup charts are way more informative in regards to how hard your character may have to work in whichever given match you're currently playing. Matchup charts are often made by someone who actually plays that character. This means that they're a lot more likely to have good knowledge and understanding of how their main fares against everybody else in the roster. They'll be able to give solid reasoning behind each placement that is made. And to be honest, I don't think I could say the same for a lot of tier lists, where people will place some characters in areas of that tier list without knowing much about them, either theoretically or practically. Matchup charts too still run the risk of being misused in a way similar to how I've said tier lists are misused. It's possible for me or anyone else to blame simply worst player on a matchup, but at least this time they could possibly be right about their character having a hard time. But there's also the possibility that one of the players isn't even playing the character in the way that the creator of a matchup chart pictured when creating the chart, so that losing matchup that someone is using as an excuse for their losses still might not even be justified. Am I saying that the FGC is better off without tier lists? Maybe. I don't have the time to get into every single facet of what tier lists cause in this video, nor do I really want to, but for example there'd be less reducing players and their skills down to their characters, less weak commentary, less surface level discussion, to name a few. But tier lists aren't all bad. Tier lists give players a place to look at character strength before they commit to a main. Tier lists are also still good ways to start discussion about a game and its roster, even if these discussions themselves could use some improvement. Tier lists give this to us and I'm glad that they do. I don't think that they should be purged from the FGC or anything. I doubt that they could anyway, not only because it's so ingrained into the community, but also because, for all the crappy things they bring about, there are good reasons to have tier lists. I think that somewhere along the line I forgot about the good in tier lists. Maybe it's because I've gotten so used to seeing them churned out on Twitter left and right, often without explanations provided and no real discussions taking place from them. Damn, is this video actually just a rant about twitter.com? I wouldn't want tier lists gone. They're important and they're also good fun to look at from time to time. It gets a little excessive seeing so many without explanations, seeing them misused, seeing them as justification for match outcomes, seeing them be way too influential on new players. But be honest, we all like to look at a tier list. Something I do want to mention though is the Guilty Gear XX Accent Core Plus R community. I don't have much to say, but as far as I'm aware, they've done kind of a tier list purge from their community. I'm assuming the reason is similar to some of the stuff I've mentioned in this video. There are occasionally still times where people ask about a character's tier and they are given a general idea of what common thoughts are of the character, but I think the popular sentiment in the community, or at least in their Discord server, is to play who you like. You can win with anyone. Which is true. Tier lists can be a distraction from finding the right character for you, especially in a game like Plus R. Now, it's unrealistic to say the same for every game, but for most players, I'd still say play what you like. Well, unless what you like is picking top tiers, then more power to you. All in all, tier lists can potentially contribute to an unhealthy mindset when approaching fighting games, but the thing is, they're everywhere. I'm pretty much guaranteed to see a new tier list every day when I scroll through Twitter, and well, that's not so bad. There's a reason tier lists are so frequent after all. They're fun. It's fun to see people's different takes on what the meta currently looks like, and it's especially fun to look for the characters you play and see where they place. In some cases, they even spark discussion. Sometimes. Tier lists, at least with how I see them being used now, are fun, but they really are like junk food. They're quick, easy, but not quite good for you. Stumble across one on Twitter, take a quick look at where your character ranks, easily understand how good or bad your character is relative to the rest of the cast, but a lot of the time with these tier lists, there's not much discussion involved. Even when people ask for reasonings behind certain placements, you may get some pretty surface level responses if you even get a response at all. It's even worse when people are trying to debate the placement of a character but are using different metrics for judging character strength. You've all got to be on the same page for a proper discussion. And is it healthy? Well, if I constantly saw lists saying my character is X or Y, I'd think about it more and more while I play rather than think about my own skill as a player. Despite all this, tier lists are still fun, and they're certainly not going anywhere. I don't want them to. I just think tier lists are so frequent in the FGC right now, and I feel it's important to just mention that they should be used responsibly. They are subjective, they honestly matter the most at top level play, and you should always try and look at what you can do better before you take a look at the flaws, or strengths, of your character.
Winner, Rondorekia, perfect.